This is
Hello.
Dr. Usama. I'm a medical doctor and lecturer. Today we're going to discuss digestive system. We are going to talk about different components of digestive system, its physiology, how does it work, its anatomy, what's in it, and what are different diseases that are relevant to the digestive system. So let's get into it. So what is the digestive system? So basically, digestive system is a network of organs that help you digest and absorb nutrition from your food. You do any intake from your mouth, either liquid or solid food or anything that directly goes into the in your stomach, and where it gets breakdown into different components which eventually get absorbed into your blood and releases glucose uh, throughout your body according to the requirement. So basically, digestive system includes our GI tract. GI tract means starting from mouth, oral cavity, our esophagus, stomach, large intestine, small intestine, and the relevant apparatus which we call biliary system. That includes your liver and gallbladder. So together, it all makes your digestive system. So basically, GI tract is a series of hollow organs. Hollow means solid, not solid. It's basically hollow pipe-like, a whole tract of different organs that are interconnected that help you digest your food and get your required nutrition from your food intake, whether it's liquid or it's solid food or semi-solid, whatever it is. So basically, digestive tract, we call it anything that comes that is constituted from starting from your mouth to the rectal area to the anus. So basically, uh, the whole tract that consists of intake of food, chewing process, its digestion in different steps, and then eventually uh, excretion of the waste or the leftover or anything that is not required by the body or that is usually a waste according to the body. So that gets wasted through the other end. So what does the digestive system do? Digestive system is basically it has one job of turning your food into the nutrients and the energy you need to survive. So if you take one bread or one egg or one steak, so how does that steak goes into your body and provides energy to your body? So basically, if we eat a steak, for example, it first goes the first process of digestion is chewing. Our teeth is involved, our oral cavity is involved, then it directly goes to our stomach where mechanical as well as chemical digestion take place. Mechanical digestion means stomach contracts and mix the food in with the secretions of the stomach, and then the chemical digestion starts where different enzymes or different chemical substances that break down that specific food into micronutrients that get eventually absorbed from the intestine into the bloodstream. So from the bloodstream, it directly goes to the different parts of our body. For example, the glucose goes to the brain, to the heart, to the kidneys, to the GI tract, and throughout your limbs. So this is how basically it turns food into the usable form of energy. So why digestion is important? Digestion is important because your body needs nutrients from the food you eat and the liquids you drink in order to stay healthy and function properly. So digestion is basically con- uh, is the basically way we convert macronutrients or bigger particles of the food into micronutrients or smaller particles that are absorbable from your gut into the bloodstream and that can be used by our body in usable form of energy. So nutrients can be anything, includes carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. So digestive system breaks down and absorbs nutrients from the food and liquids you consume to use for important things like energy, growth, and repairing cells. So basically, whatever you take, or whatever you have through your oral intake, it eventually gets converted into usable form of energy, which is glucose, and then that glucose is used for proper functioning of our body. Uh, if any repair process is going on, like if the person has injury or trauma, or have any invasive procedure or surgical procedure, so in that repairing or in that I would say recovery of that part, a huge amount of energy is used. So that also comes from your intake plus growth. Yes, during the growth years from the childhood till the teen years. So nutrition or the digestive system plays a very important role in absorption of different nutrients that are vitally important for the growth of body, and maturation of bones, muscles, and a lot of things that are developing over years. So the very first part of our digestive system is mouth. So basically, what's the mouth function in our digestive system? Mouth supports mainly different functions, including breathing, talking, chewing, tasting, swallowing, eating, drinking. So basically, our mouth is multifunctional depending on different type of nerves that supply uh, the mouth, sensory nerves basically. So we can taste through our mouth, we can breathe through our mouth, we can talk by different tongue movements, we can swallow uh, our food with the help of our oral cavity and the tongue, and definitely it's used for the eating or drinking. So let's dive a bit into the mouse anatomy. We do not need to go into the like very fine details. So these are teeth. This is our tongue. This is ulva, uvula, and this part of uh, mouth is called palate. So this is a very gross anatomy of mouth. Next is esophagus. Esophagus is basically the pipe that runs from your back of mouth till the stomach. So it's basically a pathway from your mouth till your stomach, which conveys or which delivers food that you just ate and chewed in your mouth. Then it conveys in the form of bolus or small ball to the stomach, where it gets eventually digested. So is located in your throat near your trachea. Trachea is a windpipe that you can feel just below your chin. And esophagus receives food from your mouth when you swallow it. Then epiglottis is basically a small flap that folds over windpipe as you swallow to prevent. So basically, in your throat, there are two passages. One is for digestion or intake of food. The other one is to to breathe. So our nasal cavity from the behind and oral cavity from behind gets unanimously drain into throat, or I would say open into the throat. So then there are two passages. Whenever we intake, we eat anything or we drink anything, there is a small flap that is epiglottis that basically shut down the airway whenever we eat or drink. So it helps to avoid going food directly into our windpipe, which eventually lead to different complications. So small flap epiglottis is preventative from our food going into our airways or our lungs. So a series of muscular contractions within the esophagus is called peristalsis that delivers food to your stomach. So basically, whenever we ingest something, we first chew it, then we just engulf it. So it goes smoothly with the help of contraction, small contraction or movements uh, that delivers the food into our stomach. So that movement is called peristalsis. So let's dive into this diagram. So basically, we just indulge something. So this is the bolus of food. So there will be contraction just proximal to the bolus, which will propel it to downwards towards the stomach, and downward area or distal area of the uh, bolus will be relaxed, so it can move forward without any barrier or without any friction or any. So this in this diagram, first the bolus was here, then the contraction due to the contraction it moved forward, and then the again next area contracted, and the bolus finally pushed into the stomach. The opening of the stomach is called sphincter. Uh, there are two sphincters in the stomach. One is the sphincter that receives food from our mouth through esophagus. The other one is a pyloric sphincter that is the sphincter through which food exits the stomach and goes into our intestines or uh, duodenum, first part of intestine. So the next part of digestive system is stomach. First, we talked about mouth, then we talked about esophagus, and now we are going to talk about stomach. So basically, stomach is a J-shaped hollow organ. It contains a cavity inside, and it is, uh, I would say, it is expandable organ. It adjusts according to the food or volume of the food you intake. So it produces enzymes, which are different chemical substances that create chemical reactions that help to digest our food. One So basically, there are two type of substances that are released in our stomach. One is gastric acid. The other one are enzymes. So the mix of enzyme and digestive juices break down food so it can pass to a small intestine. So once we ingest the food after chewing, it is kind of semi-solid. When it reaches the stomach and mixed with the juices, the juice includes gastric acid and the different enzymes. And once it's mixed, it becomes I would say like liquid for in some sort of liquid, not semi-solid, but in between a concentrated liquid and semi-solid. So then the food is passed to the pyloric sphincter. This is the other end of stomach. This is cardiac sphincter or the proximal opening of stomach. This one is the distal opening of stomach, which is called pyloric sphincter. Food then passed from the stomach to the duodenum, which is first part of intestine. So what's the stomach function? Basically, its purpose is to digest food and send it to your small intestine. The main purpose of stomach is to digest food. So majority or major portion of the food is digested here. I would say 70 to 80% food is digested here, and then it is pushed forward in the intestine, where the rest of the food is digested. So the major portion of food is digested in the stomach. So this is the major, or I would say principal function of the stomach. It temporarily stores food for 1 to 2 hours, then it contracts and relax to mix and break down food. Then it mixes the food with the enzymes and other gastric acids, the gastric acid, and then it propels food eventually into the duodenum. So this is gross anatomy of, I would say, a very bird eye view of the stomach. This part of stomach is called fundus. Different gases that are produced during digestion uh, that you might have encountered as burps or hiccups. So sometimes that gases uh, gets accumulated here in this part of the stomach. This is called fundus. This part is called cardiac sphincter. This part is called pyloric sphincter, and this fold is called antrum. So you don't need to remember the rest of the details or histopathology or micro details of the stomach. One more thing, stomach is basically composed of 2 to 3 layers. The outer layer is called serosa, then comes muscular layer, and the innermost layer is called mucosa of the stomach. Then we're going to probe into the different gastric glands that are present in the stomach. Gastric glands are basically small cluster of cells that are specialized to release specific substances uh, such as gastric acid and enzymes. So gastric glands are the glands in the lining of the stomach that plays essential role in the process of digestion. as we discussed in stomach's anatomy, that this part, the inner part is called mucosa. So gastric glands are present here in the mucosa, in the innermost side of the stomach, or in the I would say the room of the stomach or the cavity of the stomach. So their secretions make up the digestive gastric juice. The gastric glands open it into gastric pits, fovula, in the mucosae, which are small openings in the stomach. So gastric mucosa is covered with surface mucus cells. So these mucous cells are very important. As you know, some people suffer from uh, acidity commonly. So one of the reasons is their stomach is not producing enough mucus that prevents stomach walls from digesting itself. So what happens if there is not enough mucus in the stomach lining? So the juices or the chemical substances that are released inside the stomach starts to digest the stomach wall, which leads to the gastric ulcers. So these mucous cells are very vital for the normal functioning of the stomach. Next, there are two type of gastric glands: the exocrine gland and the endocrine gland. So the exocrine gland uh, is a major gland which covers almost 80% of the stomach area. Then comes the oxyntic gland that contains parietal cells that produce hydrochloric acid, or the acid that digests protein or fat or our food or different components. So basically, our stomach produces two type of substances. There are two areas or two type of glands. One type of glands produce different type of enzymes, lipases, proteases. Lipases digest lipids, proteases digest proteins. So these are the glands that are present in the stomach. Next type of glands secrete HCl, hydrochloric acid. It's a type of acid that digests the food or break down the food into smaller particles that can be easily digested or absorbed in our intestines. The next part of the digestive system is small intestine. So basically, uh, imagine it was our mouth, then there was esophagus, then there is our stomach, and after the stomach, after exiting the stomach through the pylorus, and food goes into the small intestine. So small intestine is basically made up of three segments. First segment is called duodenum, then jejunum, and then is ileum. So small intestine is almost 22 feet long muscular tube that breaks down food using enzymes released by pancreas and bile from the liver. So here comes the function of liver and the gallbladder, which are connected organs to the digestive system. So in the first part of small intestine, which is duodenum, uh, here different type of enzymes are released and food is further digested and absorbed. Peristalsis also works in this organ, moving forward through and mixing it with digestive juices from pancreas and liver. Remember, our digestive system is long, muscular tubing system that pushes food through and through from starting uh, the esophagus and till the last part of intestine. Food is pushed and digested and absorbed, and the rest is excreted. So throughout the intestine, there is a process that is called peristalsis that pushes food toward the distal end, so the food keeps moving forward. So the function of the small intestine is where most of the long process of digestion take place. It systemically breaks down food. Basically, there are different type of micronutrients, like if we have proteins in different segments, which is further digested here. We have lipids that are further digested here. Then uh, in absorbable form, the nutrients are absorbed here in the intestine, small intestine. It extracts water uh, depending on the need of our body and moves food along the gastrointestinal tract. So basically, uh, whatever this part of intestine absorbs or digests the food, it keeps that nutrient and sends it to the bloodstream, and it pushes the rest of it to the next part. So whatever is needed in the next part will be distributed there or digested there accordingly. So one of the major glands of digestion is pancreas. So basically, pancreas produces two type of enzymes. One is lipase, one is amylase. So these two type of enzymes are required to digest carbohydrates. And there is another function of this pancreas is to release glucagon and insulin. These are two very vital hormones of our body. So insulin is basically regulator of glucose or extra glucose. Whenever we ingest something, uh, the amount of or the levels of glucose rises in our blood. So the insulin gets released accordingly and adjusts blood glucose levels, whether by digesting glucose or by sending glucose into the cells or by depositing glucose in different other forms. So glucagon is the another hormone that functions uh, exactly opposite to the insulin. So whenever there is a need of glucose and if there is not sufficient intake of food, so the glucagon uh, its major function is to break down already present deposits in our body to release glucose and to maximize glucose in our blood. So this is how these hormones antagonize each other's functions and keep our body functioning normal. So there I'm going to repeat the functions of pancreas. This is the pancreas. There are two type of function. One is exocrine and one is endocrine. So it helps to digest food by two enzymes, which are amylase and lipase. The other function of pancreas is to release or secrete hormones, uh, make hormones that are insulin and glucagon that is directly sent to the blood, and uh, these two hormones regulate blood sugar levels accordingly. So in diabetic patients, the insulin levels are not normal, or whether insulin is not functioning, or the cell receptors are gone that receive insulin and start digesting glucose. So this is the malfunction of either insulin production or insulin receptors that are present on different cells insulin gets attached on those receptors, and eventually it helps to maintain normal level of glucose in our body. If this process fails, then the diabetes sets in. Let's move forward with the liver. So the human liver is an organ and gland in human body. It's basically spongy, wedge-shaped organ, reddish brown in color, and about the size of small football. So it's basically a solid organ, not hollow organ like the stomach or intestines or esophagus. So liver has a lot of functions basically. It cleans toxins or harmful substances out of blood, whether they are coming from food, whether they are coming from different drugs or medicines we are taking, whether they are coming from any sort of infection or any other disease going on. So they also get rid of uh, uh, old red blood cells, which are a type of our blood cell. When they are old and worn out and no longer functional, so the liver sets in and get rid of those old red blood cells. It makes bile fluid that helps the body digest food. So liver forms or makes the bile that goes into the gallbladder, and eventually it is released into the small intestine. That and this liquid or this fluid helps the body to digest food further. It metabolizes proteins, carbohydrates, and fats so your body can use them. So yes, according to the need of our body, liver can synthesize proteins and metabolizes carbohydrates and fats whenever there is a need. So it functions accordingly. It produces substances to help blood clot, regulates the amount of blood in the body, stores glycogen, energy source, and vitamins to be used by the body later. So basically, glycogen is a macromolecule which is formed by the uh, accumulation of different so many glucose molecules, and it is a storable form of energy, storable form of carbohydrate, and it is stored in the liver. So, and vitamins are also stored in the liver. So, whenever they are needed, they are released accordingly under the functioning of under the influence of different hormones. So, what is the structure of liver? Its structure is more like a cone or wedge shaped. Uh, there are different lobes of the liver. So this is how liver sits on the stomach. Uh, Let me draw a small diagram. So here is our chest and our lungs. So this liver just sits below the diaphragm. Diaphragm is the muscle that separates our gut or our body organs from our chest. So these are our lungs, and the liver is present just below our chest cavity and above the stomach. This is the gallbladder. So liver forms the bile, then it goes and gets stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. Then it is released in the small intestine. So this leaf-like structure present behind the stomach is called pancreas. So this green duct coming from behind the stomach, and these gets joined and get released in this hollow structure or pipe. This is called duodenum, first part of small intestine. So this is how the structure of liver is, and this is how it gets functioned. Moving to the next slide. Slides are moving. Dr. Lambert, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you, but I see the structure of the liver. Is that the slide you want?
Yes, yes. I can see it's stuck.
And that's you drawing on the diagram, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So we are going to use eraser of the previous diagram. Okay, moving on to the gallbladder, which is also a part of liver. So this is the structure that was just below the liver, this greenish part. So this small sac is called gallbladder. This is called bile duct, and this gets emptied into the duodenum, which is small intestine. So basically, liver forms bile, which is a greenish fluid that helps digest the food. That greenish fluid goes into the sac, stays there and gets concentrated and then released slowly into the intestine according to the need or after the food whenever we intake something. So then it is released in the small intestine, which and eventually it helps to digest the food. So your gallbladder is part of a digestive system. Its main function is to store bile. Bile helps to digest different type of fats we intake. It's a mixture of mainly cholesterol, bilirubin, and bile salts. Cholesterol is a type of lipid. Bilirubin is a leftover substance or chemical that is formed after the breakdown of our worn out cells, and there are different salts. So this is a mixture of these two, three ingredients, which is released into the intestine for the digestion. Next is yes, the next part of intestine is colon, which is large intestine. So basically, it is divided into major parts, three or four parts. First part is ascending colon, as you can see. So this small end is small intestine. Then it drains into the large intestine. This part, this dilated part is cecum, and this small finger-like structure is called appendix. So the very first part of cecum is called ascending. First part of colon is called ascending colon. As you can see, it ascends upwards, then it goes horizontal. This part, horizontal part, is called transverse colon. This is hepatic flexure, or this junction or this turn is called hepatic flexure. This is on the right part of our belly, and this part is on the left part of our belly. So this in between structure, horizontal colon, is called transverse colon, and after this turn, it descends down toward the rectum. This part is called descending colon. The last part before the rectum is called sigmoid colon, and this it is a very I would say looped form of uh, colon which stores our waste or stools. Then eventually stools are released or organized into the rectum, which are eventually secreted, or sorry, excreted. So the colon is responsible for processing waste that emptying our bowels is easy and convenient. It's a 6 foot long muscular tube that connects the small intestine to the rectum. So how does it fit in our body? Even though it is 6 feet, it is folded into the different flexures or different folds and adjusted to make sure it fits in our body. So it's a 6 foot long muscular tube that connects the small intestine to the rectum. It's made up of cecum. This part is called cecum. The next part is ascending colon right here, and next is transverse colon, and the next part is called descending colon, which is on the left side of abdomen or belly. Next comes the sigmoid colon, which stores the waste for a while, unless it is conveniently excreted. So sigmoid colon drains into the rectum, which organizes the stool or waste product into the uh, last part of tract, and then it is eventually excreted. So stool or waste left over from the digestive process is passed through the colon by means of peristalsis. Again, peristalsis is a movement in proximal part is contracted and the distal part is relaxed. So the waste or food, whatever in it, the in the intestine, it it is propelled or pushed forward, so it can keep moving, or it should keep moving. So if that moving or mobility of the gut is impaired, as you might have encountered after anesthesia or of surgical procedures. So in that case, that motility is gone for a while or for a few hours. So we cannot, digest food in that moment or in that duration. And if we intake something, either liquid or food, just after anesthesia, so that will eventually, it will eventually get vomited or propelled backward instead of going forward. So that's why it is always advised to not eat or drink anything after general or spinal anesthesia or immediately after any sort of anesthesia. So anesthesia, what does anesthesia cause? Anesthesia causes it slows down basically the intestinal movements. So the food or waste or whatever in the intestine, it does not go, it moves, it doesn't move forward. So it just it's it gets sets in the form of stasis. So there are different type of drugs and different type of diseases that in those diseases, stasis is seen in those diseases. Peristalsis, absent peristalsis, the movement that propels food. So different type of drugs are available that are used to help and to keep the food or waste going and moving forward. So the stool or waste left over from the digestive process pass through the colon by means of peristalsis, first in a liquid state and ultimately in the solid form. So whenever the digested food is available in the small intestine, it is in the liquid or semi-solid form. or I would say concentrated liquid form. When it moves through these loops of this intestine, water is absorbed, and that uh, excreta or the waste gets converted into solid form, because the intestine reabsorbs the water from it and sends back to the circulation. So our body gets or stays hydrated this way. So what if this function gets impaired? We get diarrhea. Diarrhea occurs because there is either there is impaired reabsorption of water from this from the colon, or whether there is very I would say too much or excessive secretion of water from our body, and so this is why we get dehydrated in case of diarrhea. Uh, as stool passes through the colon, water is removed. Stool is stored in the sigmoid colon. This is usually S-shaped until a mass movement empties into the rectum once or twice a day conveniently. So it basically gets stored in this part of the colon, and it is a voluntary movement. Whenever there is voluntary uh, heavy movement or stronger movement or stronger push from our body, then it gets eventually emptied or drained outside from our body from through the rectum and the anus. So diagram is basically added uh, to make it more elaborative, as just like the previous slides. So this is the anus, which is the last part of digestive system. So basically, it contains uh, the main purpose of explaining this part of the intestine is to highlight the major part of its importance, or the major role of anus in digestion and the release of waste or stools. So basically, there are different type of muscles in our pelvis or a pelvic floor that supports our body from lower end. So this way, our body stays in our position instead of prolapsing downwards. There are two types of sphincters, internal and external. So these two sphincters and on bilateral side of the rectum are mainly, they have role in emptying of or I would say passing the stool conveniently and by willingly. So basically, most of the adults are able to control and release the bowel movements, and to able to pass stools by the contraction or by relaxation of these sphincters. So this is how leakage is not possible if these sphincters are intact or patent. So the lining of upper anus is able to detect rectal contents. It lets you know whether the contents are liquid, gas, or solid. So this is how you detect whether you are going to pass gas, you are going to pass a liquid stool, or whether you are going to pass solid stool. So this upper part of rectum detects uh, this thing. So anus is surrounded by sphincter muscle that important allowing control of stool. The pelvic floor muscle creates an angle between the rectum and the anus that stops stool from the coming out when it is not supposed, or whenever the person is not convenient to release the stool. So then internal sphincter is always tight except when the stool enters the rectum. So whenever there are two types of sphincters, internal sphincter and the external sphincter. Internal sphincter is not in our control, but external sphincter is in our control. So whenever is food enters in the rectum, the internal sphincter automatically constricts, and it helps to avoid spillage of stools unnecessarily, or when they are not supposed to leak or go released. So the external sphincter, this part is in our control, and this keeps us continent, which means it prevents us from pooping involuntarily. So this is how gut movements and the stools are controlled. So this is the recap of different type of digestive enzymes that are released. First one, let's talk about the enzyme in the mouth, or it is present in our saliva most of the times. It is amylase, which breaks down starches into disaccharides. Imagine if you are taking or chewing a bubble gum, and eventually it it gets tasteless after a minute or a while. So what's the main reason behind it? So this guy amylase digests the glucose or sweet part in the chewing gum that gets released in our mouth or oral cavity, and those sweetness or the glucose in that part is digested by amylase, and this is why the chewing gum goes tasteless. The next part is stomach, which releases pepsin. It comes pepsin. Uh, it breaks proteins into smaller peptides. Proteins means you ate something or steak in different big chunks. So that's what's the main purpose? Some pepsin. Pepsin basically breaks down that big chunks into smaller chunks, so that the smaller chunks can be digested chemically by different further series of enzymes. So next comes the small intestine. So there is an opening from pancreas, that leaf-like structure I told you guys, uh, and the different enzymes are released from the pancreas into the small intestine through the opening. So basically, there are pancreatic amylase, trypsin, lipase. Uh, Pancreatic amylase continues the breakdown of starch. So this is another enzyme that break down the starch, which is a type of carbohydrate. Next comes trypsin. It breaks down peptides into smaller polypeptides and dipeptides. So pepsin first converts big chunks into smaller chunks, which are called peptides, and then trypsin acts on those small peptides or smaller chunks and divides and breaks down it into the further very small particles that might or may not be detectable under naked eye. Next is lipase. Lipase is basically the enzyme. As you can see, this indicates lipids. So lipase acts on the lipids or the fatty part of food and breaks down fats. Next part is small intestine. This was a part that we was discussing the enzymes coming from pancreas. The next part we're going to talk about the small intestine. So these enzymes are the enzymes of small intestine or intrinsic enzymes. So these three comes from the pancreas and released into the small intestine, but these are maltose, rose lactase, peptidase. So these enzymes are intrinsic enzymes that are released in the small intestine. So these three converts disaccharide into monosaccharide, which means if we have taken raw sugars such as uh, sucrose or lactose via milk or anything. So these enzyme converts these big sugars into the small sugars, monosaccharides. Mono means one particle or one molecule of sugar, which is glucose. Next is peptidase. It is, as I said, there is a chain of enzymes that break down food step by step. First, there was pepsin for protein, then there was trypsin for protein. Now, this is peptidase for the protein. So, peptidase is basically enzyme that is eventual step of the digestion of protein. It breaks down proteins into amino acids. Amino acids are basically small molecules, each molecule, and they combine to form protein. So, basically, amino acids are the building block of proteins. So what happens in our body? There is anabolic process as well as catabolic process. Anabolic process means there is construction of something. There is construction of glucose. Sorry, there is construction of proteins, carbohydrates, or anything. Catabolism is basically the uh, digestion or breakdown of those big molecules like protein into amino acids. But in anabolism, uh, amino acids get piled up to form protein. So these two processes, anabolism and catabolism, together they are called metabolism of our body. So metabolism, what is metabolism? Metabolism is basically a normal process of our body in which there is a continuous breakdown and construction of different molecules is being carried out according to the need of our body. So we are not going to discuss these. Yes, there are different conditions and disorders that are related to the digestive system. First one is constipation, next one is diarrhea, next is heartburn or acidity. First one is constipation generally happens when you go poop and have a bowel movement less frequently, and you get bloated and you're not able to pass stools. So even if you pass stools, stool or poop is very dry and is very difficult and painful to pass. So this is constipation, and it is not normal to have constipation oftenly. Next is diarrhea. Diarrhea is when you have loose or watery stools, which mean you are losing excess water in the form of loose stools, and your intestine is not absorbing enough water to send it back to the blood. So diarrhea can be caused by many things, including bacterial infections, but sometimes the cause is unknown. It can be due to food poisoning, different type of food substances, due to irritation as well. Next is heartburn. Although this has heart in its name, but it doesn't literally mean heart is burning. Actually, it's a digestive issue in which you feel burning sensation in your chest, and this is due to the acid reflux in your esophagus. Basically, this part is called esophagus. This is the sphincter which is closed once the food is in and getting digested. What happens when this sphincter or this door gets malfunctioned? So these food or the chemical substances, including gastric acids, sorry, and the different enzyme get a reflux and get back spilled into the esophagus, and the esophagus passes just behind our lungs and the heart. So this is why we feel a burning sensation in our chest, because our food is being spilled backwards into the esophagus, and it happens due to the malfunction of this sphincter. It can happen in normal people as well if we take too much spicy food, or if we lie down immediately after taking so much food. So it happens when acidic digestive juices come from your stomach go back up in our esophagus. So it's not a normal process that our food gets spilled backward in upward direction, but whenever it happens, it means your digestive juices or acids are coming up from your stomach that need to be addressed. So there are different type of medicines available that helps to tackle this situation, or to control the acidity, or to produce less acid in the stomach. Next, there are different other diseases as well. Hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids are basically small swellings in the anal area. They are enlarged veins that form inside and outside of your anus and rectum. They can be painful, uncomfortable, and cause rectal bleeding. The next one is stomach flu, which is gastroenteritis. It is a sort of infection of the stomach and upper part of intestine caused by the virus. So it is a sort of infection. So each year, many people go through this. Some people have mild symptoms, and some might have severe symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and altered bowel movements. Next comes the ulcers. Ulcer is a type of wound that gets developed inside the stomach due to excessive acid or due to infection of a bacteria called H. pylori or Helicobacter pylori. And long-term use of anti-inflammatory drugs such as brufen, etc., painkillers of different types. So next comes the gallstones. Gallstones are basically small stones that get formed in the gallbladder. As you know, we already discussed this part that the bile is secreted from the liver and then it eventually stored and concentrated here. And sometimes, due to some imbalance, these the concentrated bile gets stored in the form of stones and get hardened, and then those stones cause irritation and pain whenever we intake some sort of food, or preferably if we take fatty food. So stones are sometimes they can dislodge and go into this duct and cause obstruction. So some people might have other symptoms as well, might have jaundice, might have itching on their body, might have yellow eyes. So there are different manifestations of the disease of uh, obstructive jaundice. Obstructive jaundice mean there is obstruction and the bile cannot go down into your intestine, and it eventually starts accumulating in blood. So bile is usually yellow, so it causes your skin to turn yellow a bit. There's a bit tint of yellowness in your hands, on your palms, in your soles, in on your white part of eye, which is sclera, which gets turned yellow eventually. So, gallstones are small pieces of solid material formed digestive fluid that form in your gallbladder. This is the gallbladder, a small organ under your liver. So, there are two type of solution, whether you can manage if there is an infection or irritation, acute irritation going on in the gallbladder. We manage it through antibiotics and painkillers, and we settle down fever if uh, there is spike of temperature of your body. But if there's not any sort of fever or anything and you get pain whenever you eat something, so the main the major treatment, the eventual treatment of the gallstones is surgical removal of gallbladder or the stones through either open surgery or through laparoscopic surgery. Next is irritable bowel syndrome. IBS is a condition in which colon muscle contracts more or less often than normal. So basically, it's a sort of irritative situation in which our gut gets irritated. Sometimes it can it can be manifested as excessive gas, or bloating, abdominal pain, and cramps. So there are different ways to tackle the irritable bowel syndrome. Either sometimes if it is severe, it can be uh, controlled or treated with the medicines, but if it is mild, it can be treated with uh, diet or using specific diet and avoiding diet that triggers. Next is lactose intolerance. It's a basically condition in which people are lactose intolerant, which means if whenever they take dairy products, they are unable to digest that lactose in those products. And what is lactose? Lactose is a sort of carbohydrate sugar that is primarily found in dairy products. So whenever they take this dairy products, they might get bloating, diarrhea, or might get cramps. So why does it happens? It happens. So there is an enzyme that is called lactase that breaks down this sugar, lactose. So in these people, lactase enzyme is absent. So in that case, this lactose becomes an irritant for the gut. Next disease is diverticulosis or diverticulitis. So these are two conditions that occur in your large intestine, which we already talked about: ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. So this was your large intestine. So both share the common feature of diverticula. Diverticula are basically different outpouching or different sacs that are formed on the gut, and that might contain blood vessels. And if they stay untreated, they might lead to bleeding inside your intestine, and you might suffer from melena. Melena is basically stools mixed with the blood. So both share the common feature of diverticula. Diverticula. These guys are diverticula. Here, here, here. So these are the pockets or bulges that form in walls of your colon. So this was all about the digestive system, including anatomy, physiology, how it does work, different type of chemical substances that are released, different type of diseases that are associated with the digestive system. Now I'm going to take the questions one by one. Please go ahead if you have any sort of questions.